Can gems be born of the fiery lava of a volcano? Can gems be carried upward or formed within magma that forms deep within the earth? Can we mine them once the rock has cooled down into a solid volcanic rock? While the vast majority of all volcanic rocks doesn't contain any gems, there are some very unusual types that do. Today we're going to talk about those rare and valuable types of volcanic rock that do contain gems and where you can find them. I'm Chris Ralph, the professional prospector, and in this video we will examine the many types of gems that are formed in volcanic magma, like this. Now, if we're going to talk about gems formed in lava, we need to start with talking about what lava and volcanic rocks are. We can start by discussing the definition of what these rocks are and compare them. Let's look at what geologists call magma versus lava versus volcanic rock. Geologists consider volcanic rock to be the solid material. The lava is stuff that comes up onto the surface. But while it's still deep within the earth, the molten rock is called magma. And that's what it is before it comes up onto the surface and becomes lava. Geologists consider volcanic rock to be igneous extrusive because it is extruded onto the surface. And once on the surface, it cools really fast. Now, if magma, the molten rock, cools very slowly inside the earth, it'll grow crystals of different sizes and larger sizes large enough that you can see. The rocks with crystals large enough that you can see them are going to be things like granite or diorite or gabbro. And just as those rocks are given different names based on what they're made of, volcanic rocks are also given different names based on what they're made of. The different volcanic rocks have different names, and these names include basalt, lamprophire, kimberlite, andesite, rhyolite, obsidian, and others. The depth that the magma comes from has a big effect on what it's made of. Magma that comes from deep within the earth tends to be richer in iron and leaner in things like silicon dioxide, like quartz. The stuff that's richer in iron and lower in quartz tends to flow more easily and flow outward easily. The stuff that's rich in silica or quartz and low in iron tends to be sticky and gets stuck and sometimes creates explosions like happened at Mount St. Helens. When talking about lava-born gems, we're specifically talking about the gems that form in the molten rock. We're not talking about any gems that might form after the lava has solidified and cooled and various geologic processes have led to formation of gems in the rock afterwards. There are examples of volcanic rock that have gemstones formed afterwards, and these include some types of garnet, some types of topaz, red beryl, and a few others. Another one is my favorite, the fire agate, can tend to form in rhyolite after it's cooled. But in this video, we are just looking at the various gemstones that are formed in the lava and carried along by it and are there when it starts to cool. And we can mine them, of course, once the rock has cooled down. Now, of course, gemstones have to be of a certain size. Microscopic crystals are not going to be gemstones, no matter what they are. But what has to happen in the process of forming a stone is there has to be an environment that the crystal can grow. You have to have an environment where the atoms are free to move about and assemble into the way that they want to assemble. I actually did a whole video on that, and I'll put a link to that at the end of this video. But the atoms have to be able to move and come together, and of course in a molten lava they have that opportunity to move around because the magma is a liquid. Now, magmatic gems form either by crystallization of part of the magma at great depth or near to the Earth's surface. Minerals in the crust crystallize from this magma over a range of temperatures, and the chemistry of the magma and the temperature of the crystallization determines what minerals will come out of the rock. Minerals that grow only at high temperatures will be formed only at great depth, while minerals that tend to form at magma but at a cooler temperature will be formed nearer to the surface. Now, for the stuff formed at great depth, the magma can tend to carry them along and transport them from the great depth within the Earth's crust up to the surface where they can be mined once the rock is cooled, and then we can get them on the surface. But deep, deep, deep within the crust of the Earth, we can't reach them. So the magma kind of rips off the side of the walls of the crust at deep depth and pulls it up with it so that we can get to the gems once they get on the surface. These gemstones that form at great depth and then are transported to the surface are called xenocrysts. That's what geologists call them. It's xene, is a Greek prefix for stranger, and so they're strangers to the surface because they've come from great depth. The other process that's involved in forming crystals is types of crystals that form at cooler temperatures, and they have a chance to form near the surface. They'll happen when some magma gets up close to the surface and has a chance to cool slowly, but not in the way that forms like granite or gabbro or some other rock like that, but has a chance to cool enough to form certain types of crystals. These are called phenocrysts because they form in the magma as it's starting to cool. And sunstones are a great example of those. I have a diagram that may illustrate this for you better, so let me show you that diagram.
So this illustrates some of the features of a volcanic system. You'll notice that you have a couple of different volcanoes on the surface, and it's very normal that there'll be one primary magma chamber down deep that ties in multiple volcanoes and other eruption sources. Now, in this drawing, you see various things. You have items labeled C and D, and item labeled C up near the surface is a body of magma that's made its way up to the surface to where it can cool, but it's not actually erupted onto the surface. And in places like this, you can get formation of things like sunstone, feldspar crystals, and stuff like that, because it has a chance to cool, but cool slowly so it can grow crystals. Now, in the primary magma chamber, off to the left-hand side, you'll see what's labeled as a xenolith, and that's your deeper rock that's been torn loose from the main body of the crust, and because it's deep, it's had a chance to grow crystals that require a lot of heat and a lot of time to grow. Now, a xenolith like this, in this scale, would be very large rock, but as it gets erupted onto the surface by the flow of the magma, it can get broken up into many little pieces, which will make their way out onto the surface through volcanoes or through dikes. Now, you see labeled E, the one in the center is a dike that makes it to the surface. And actually, dikes like this that don't have a conical volcano associated with them are actually very common eruption sources. And even if there is a volcano on the surface, a lot of times eventually the volcano will be eroded away and you'll be left in the rock with this dike or other system that allowed, basically through a fault or some other line of weakness in the rock, allowed the magma to make its way onto the surface. And these types of things can bring up the deep xenoliths and then pour out magma or pour out lava onto the surface where it cools and then it can be worked. This is very common for most of the gemstones that are xenolith related, and we'll be talking about that more in just a few minutes.
Now, to be sure, the volcanic rocks which these gems form in have to be just right in many ways. The overwhelming percentage of volcanic rocks all over the earth have no gemstones in them whatsoever. It takes a very special set of conditions, and so only a very, very tiny percent of volcanic rocks have gems in them. And this makes lava-borne gemstones very rare. Gem-bearing volcanic rocks are just a tiny percentage, like literally 1 in 10,000 or even less. Now, the different gems formed in lava include Peridot, Sunstone, Spinel, ruby and sapphire, Zircon, and diamond. That's a lot of important gemstones. Let's take a look at each one of them individually. We'll start out with Peridot. Peridot is a magnesium iron silicate mineral that's one of the first minerals to form, meaning it forms only at real high temperatures. It occurs in rocks that are high in iron and low in silica, like gabbro or basalt. The magnesium-rich version of olivine, which is the mineral name, is the one that's the dominant form that we call Peridot as a gemstone. These gems actually form in the upper mantle at the lower crust, well deep within the earth. Much of the peridot on the gem market comes from alkali basalt eruptions that originated in the mantle and were carried up as large chunks of mantle rocks, including olivine and pyroxene crystals, in the form of xenoliths or xenocrysts. These xenoliths represent rocks that formed at great depth but were ripped free by the movement of the magma going upward toward the surface. And once they get to the surface, they're in basaltic types of lavas and are emitted onto the surface where the lava cools and the peridot can be taken from the lava. These gems are found in major deposits in the U.S. state of Arizona and at Jilin, I'm probably mispronouncing that, in China. Minor amounts of peridot can actually be picked up in parts of Hawaii. Years ago, I stayed at a guy's house. I paid for it, I rented it. And his driveway was paved with basalt cobbles and rocks, and in among them were little bits of peridot. Let's take a closer look at the gemstone peridot.
So the peridot-bearing lava, when it comes up to the surface and hardens, you can see it's got chunks of this green olivine in it, peridot, and then it's interspersed in with the dark gray basalt rock. And then these can be broken open and crystals sometimes come out that are large enough to facet. Here's an example from Arizona. You can see in this example that the crystals in the xenolith are much larger, and basically the crystals are broken out, and the ones that are clean enough and whole enough and unfractured enough can be cut into gemstones. The rough ends up looking something like this. Each piece of rough is just a broken section of a crystal. There's no natural crystal faces on this, but each one is a single crystal. An exceptionally nice piece of peridot rough might look something like this and could be cut into a beautiful gemstone. And the finished gemstone might look something like this beautiful piece, which could easily be set in an attractive high-dollar piece of jewelry. This is the peridot mining area in Arizona. It's on an Indian reservation, so it's only open to tribal members, but they do sometimes sell the rough that they take out of this area that they mine it.
Feldspars begin to crystallize out of magma at lower temperatures or when the magma is cooler. It's thought that they form in magma chambers that come close enough to the surface to start to cool somewhat, but deep enough that they don't just freeze into solid volcanic rock. As the magma starts to slowly cool, crystals begin to form within it. And with the right chemistry of the lava, the crystals that form will be crystals of feldspar. And these form as phenocrysts, basically crystals that grow out of the magma at nearer surface temperatures. Once the magma gets to the surface, even though the crystals of feldspar are formed within them, as the magma cools and solidifies, a lot of times these nice crystals are fractured and fragmented into broken pieces, basically. Now, there are a couple different places where these are mined in the state of Oregon. One of them is near the little town of Plush, and there's a couple of dig areas that you can go to. I've had a great time digging for sunstones, and I found some really great rocks. Let me show you a little bit more about sunstones as they come from this deposit near Plush. I'm going to show you some examples and show you about how you can go out there and dig them for yourself.
Here's a picture of a feldspar crystal with a nice red color right in the rock where it grew in the molten basalt lava or magma before it actually came onto the surface and solidified. In some places, the rock surrounding the crystal is soft enough that can be broken out just with a pick, while in other places it's strong enough that it needs to be broken out with heavy equipment or sometimes even blasting. And this is how it comes out of the ground in broken crystal fragments, most of which are kind of a pale straw yellow color, but some of them have a red center, red colored center. This is a selection of ones mostly that have the red center. The gems come in a variety of colors, with some stones that are actually quite large. There are, of course, the beautiful intense red color ones, but there are also green colors as well, and even beautiful bicolor stones that shows shades of both the greens and the reds. The gems are spread over a huge area, and there are places where you can just go out there and dig, both as fee areas, which this one is, and also in open desert that's set aside by the BLM for rockhounds. Nice finds are sometimes made, and this huge red stone was found while I was out there the last time I was there. Some of the fee digs even have screening plants where they'll take the raw material and they'll screen it to the right size for the gemstones and run it across a conveyor belt, and you can just stand there and pick off the gems as they come by you. I just think that sunstones are an underappreciated gemstone, and these are some of the ones that I got while I was out there last time, of course, after they've been faceted.
Next, let's look at ruby and sapphire. Now, I got them together because ruby and sapphire are actually the same mineral. It's a mineral called corundum, and chemically they're both aluminum oxide. But if you color it red with chromium, you have a ruby. If you color it blue or yellow or other colors with other different elements, you have some sort of sapphire. Ruby and the many colors of sapphire are both forms of the mineral corundum. It can occur in several types of deposits, but one of the most important are xenocrysts in igneous basalt. Both the sapphire and the ruby that come from alkali basalts have glassy silicate melt inclusions in them, which represent some primordial magma material that's solidified, in which the gem corundum crystals were originally growing. This indicates that although sapphire and ruby were xenocrysts in the alkali basalts that carried them upward to the surface, they had a magmatic origin from deep within the earth. Because of its toughness and its hardness, corundum tends to survive in alluvial deposits. And so if it's formed in a basalt type of rock and the rock is eroded and weathered away, the ruby and sapphire will survive as alluvial gravels. And so a lot of ruby and sapphire are mined from gravels that were once part of these volcanic rocks, but the volcanic rocks have long weathered away. Now, a lot of these ruby and sapphire crystals like this are found in Southeast Asia, but there are rocks like this, sapphire and ruby bearing basalt rocks in the state of Montana in the US. And there are places where you can go in the US and dig for these crystals. Let's take a look at some pictures and examine it more closely.
In Myanmar or Burma, there are places where the locals have dug for rubies and or sapphires for many decades, creating great excavations like this. In Sri Lanka, they dig simple shafts like this to reach down to the gem-bearing gravels. There are also deposits of this type in Africa. These rubies were mined in a similar type of deposit in Mozambique. On the Missouri River near Helena, there are places where tourists can sift gravels to pick up sapphires like these. But perhaps the most famous of the Montana sapphires are those found in Yogo Gulch, just like with this beautiful blue color. They've recently started mining again at Yogo Gulch, and they're actually doing hard rock mining for sapphires there for the first time in many decades. They are considered to be some of the most beautiful sapphires in the world, though almost all the stones are on the small side. Here is a rare specimen of a Yogo Gulch sapphire, still in its lamprifier volcanic rock host.
The gem known as Spinel occurs in a variety of colors, and in fact the red form has historically, centuries ago, were confused with ruby. In the Crown of England, the Black Prince's ruby is the big giant Spinel. Spinel is a common mineral in a lot of metamorphic rocks, but it can also form as an accessory mineral in mafic volcanic rocks like basalt. These form deep within the earth, like the corundum crystals, and also like corundum, it has a tendency to survive the erosion and destruction of the volcanic rocks that contain them and survive as a gravel. And so a lot of spinel is taken forth from alluvial gravels. A lot of alluvial gravels with spinel come from either Southeast Asia or Africa. Let's take a look at some pictures of spinel and examine this a little more closely.
Spinel is a gemstone that comes in just a wide range of color, very similar to sapphire. The multicolored spinel just seems to come in every color of the rainbow. There are other districts where, because of the chemistry of the lava host rock, just seems to produce spinel only in shades of pink to red. Yet in other districts, because of the chemical nature of the basalt host, there produces spinel in ranges of blue to violet types of shades. And I do think that spinel is really an underappreciated gemstone because of its hardness and its color beauty.
Next, let's talk about zircon. Now, zircon, also like ruby and sapphire or spinel, is resistant to weathering. It's fairly hard, although it's not as hard as ruby or spinel. It is able to survive weathering from the alkali basalt lavas that it forms in, and then be concentrated in alluvial gravels. It's a bright mineral. It, in the colorless form, was used for years as a diamond substitute, so it's very bright. It's also available in blues and a lot of other colors. The chief places where zircon is mined is in Southeast Asia with other gem gravels, in Africa also with various gem gravels, and in Australia where it's sometimes found with sapphires. Let's take a look at some photos and information about zircon.
For many years, colorless zircon like these from Australia were used as a diamond simulant or substitute. Perhaps the best known color for zircon is this blue, but what's not known by most people is that it comes out of the ground this brown kind of color as you see in the stones on the right. It's then heat treated to bring out a stable, beautiful blue color. Another common color for zircon is this red to red, brown, pink kind of color. These stones are from China, but there's another similar deposit in Tanzania that produces zircons of virtually the same color. The last color we'll look at for zircon is this beautiful green color.
Finally, we get to the diamond, number 7. I know that a lot of people will be interested in that. Most gem diamonds form at depths between 150 and 250 kilometers below the surface in the lower part of the crust and the upper part of the mantle of the earth. The deeply formed diamonds were slowly transported upward by convection of the liquids in the mantle to shallower depths where they could be caught up in erupting igneous magmas. Diamonds are then carried to the Earth's surface by eruptions of kimberlitic or lamprolitic magmas. Kimberlitic eruptions are among the most unusual and among the most violent and explosive. In fact, the rare volcanic eruption of a kimberlite magma is thought to be the most rapid and violent explosive type of volcanic eruption on Earth. Kimberlite is by far the dominant type of eruption to bring diamonds to the Earth's surface, but not all kimberlite has diamonds. Lamprolite rocks also can contain diamonds. They are way more common than the kimberlites, but only a very small percentage of lamprolites actually have diamonds in them. Let's take a look at some of the locations and places where diamonds are found.
So here is some kimberlite and diamonds, and you can see the 3 darker pieces of kimberlite toward the front all have a diamond still embedded with them. And then you can see some diamond crystals in the front. But notice, looking at the kimberlite, first of all, it's not blue. Sometimes it's called blue ground. But you'll notice in looking at them that if you look closely, you can see that it's made of chunks of different material. And indeed, kimberlite is a volcanic breccia, meaning it's not just a smooth piece of liquid lava that came out, but because it was explosive, it's made up of chunks and bits of all sorts of things. Now here is a close-up of 2 different pieces of kimberlite, and you can see the effect that it's chunks of rock and that kind of thing mixed together with the kimberlite lava that's holding it together. Now, volcanic breccias like this are actually fairly common. They really are not unusual, but the kimberlite type of volcanic breccia, that's unusual. And even among kimberlites, not all of them have diamonds. Here's a map showing the known kimberlite deposits in the world. And you can see that there's quite a few of them. The red dots show kimberlites that they have a good idea of the age of, and the black dots show kimberlite deposits that they're not sure how old they are. But even so, there's quite a few, and like I say, not all of them have diamonds, and even of the ones that do, quite a number have some diamonds, but not nearly enough to be economically mined as a diamond deposit. But for those kimberlite or lamprifier type deposits that have some diamonds and are not economic, the diamonds survive the weathering and erosion process and get deposited in streams and become deposits of alluvial diamonds. And a significant amount of all diamonds that are mined every year come from alluvial gravel sources. I recently did an entire video on mining alluvial diamonds, and I'm going to put a link to it above right here, and so you can check on that and click on it and check out if you want to find more information about alluvial diamonds and the techniques of recovering them.
Finally, we'll cover Sheen obsidian as almost a bonus, because all the rest of these, the gemstones are formed in the basalt or in the lava, in the magma. Whereas Sheen obsidian, it can be very pretty, but it actually is the magma. It's not something that's formed in the magma. It is the solidified magma that turned lava and solidified into a volcanic rock. So it's not just the host of a gem, it's the gem itself. An iridescent rainbow-like sheen, sometimes called fire obsidian, is caused by inclusions of magnetite in tiny, tiny particles, but they're oriented in the lava, in the magma, as it solidifies, and that's what causes the dispersion and the sheen that you get. Now, there can be other minerals that also cause this rainbow effect, and when you have just a silver or gold colored sheen, sometimes that's just very, very tiny bubbles of volcanic gas that have solidified in layers oriented to a certain way inside the obsidian lava. There are a number of places where this type of material occurs. A lot of it comes from Mexico, but there's actually a place where it produces Sheen obsidian only a few miles north of here in California in the Mount Lassen area. Let's take a look at some photos and talk about it further.
This is a piece of rainbow obsidian actually from the Davis Creek collecting area up in northeastern California, almost to the Oregon border. It's an open, free collecting area. You just need to get a permit at the Modoc National Forest office in Alturas before you go out there. Rainbow obsidian is found in a number of places across the globe, Mexico and some others. It's really beautiful stuff. It doesn't get as much attention as it could. You can do objects of art, carvings, and other things out of it that are really very attractive. I've even seen cabochons as well. No two pieces are exactly alike, and some is a lot more intensely rainbowed than others. But when you find some, you'll know that it's really beautiful.
Now, I had discussed at the beginning a video that I did about how crystals grow, and I'm going to put a link to the video right up here, and you can take a look at it. It explains more about the growth of crystals, how they form, the orientation of the atoms, and how they come together. So for information along those lines, check out this video. Crystals are a really interesting science, and how they form, it's a fascinating topic. That's why I did a whole video on it. Now, most of my videos are about prospecting, usually related to gold, but sometimes for gemstones as well. And I actually wrote a book called Fistful of Gold that talks about how to find your own gold. And if you're interested in finding gold for yourself, because, hey, it's out there, I find it, and if I do, you can too. If you want to find more about that, I wrote this book, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my book right now. So let me tell you a little bit more about my book. It's called Fistful of Gold, And I wrote it because I want you to be able to go out and find for yourself fistful of gold. And you can see that it's an encyclopedia with all kinds of information, pictures, and that sort of thing. It's not in color, but color would have cost me a lot more to have printed, and so the book would have cost a lot more. It's for sale on Amazon, and you can pick it up. I'll put a link in the description below. I also serve as the editor for a prospecting magazine. It's ICMJ's Prospecting and Mining Journal. And honestly, you should check that out. We got stories and information, legal stuff, everything you know to increase your skills as a prospector. I write articles in this every month, and a lot of other very experienced prospectors contribute to the magazine as well. So check the magazine out. Also, I have a website, and the website is at NevadaOutbackGems.com. I'll put a link for it in the description below, but there's gobs of information there that you will find useful in your prospecting efforts. Finally, I want to say that I really appreciate your comments and thoughts, and even positive criticism. Don't come on there and just toss out insults, because I'll just delete your comments. But if you've got helpful things to say and questions to ask, do write and put those in the comments, because I answer my comments to people, and you'll hear from me in responding to you. So if you've enjoyed this video and you like what you see and you're interested in finding out more, well then sign up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so they'll let you know when I post new videos. And like it and share it if again you see stuff that you really are excited about. And I'll be coming out with lots more new videos, and so we'll see you again real soon.